Are you getting caught up in the latest health trends and feeling overwhelmed as to what diet is best? We get it, and that's why, as leaders of wellness in our community, Joanne's Place Health Foods has created the Wellness on Purpose podcast. On this podcast, you can expect community and brand experts to share impactful, educational, and realistic information to help you progress on your journey to live wellness on purpose now and for future generations. My name is Marissa Lachlan. I'm a holistic nutritionist in partnership with Joanne's Place and your host for this podcast. Hello, everyone. Happy New Year. It's your host, Marissa, and we are rolling into season 4 of the podcast. I can't believe that we have gone through 4 seasons together, and I'm really looking forward to continuing to help you along your wellness journey this year. Now, I couldn't do this podcast without the help of some incredible experts, and I can't wait to share with you the lineup we have this year. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Wellness on Purpose podcast. On today's episode, we've asked Lynn Vitale from Garden of Life to join us again to chat all about gut health and whether or not a probiotic is essential in your supplement regime. We've had Amber on the podcast before, but in case you missed it, she is a holistic nutritionist and product educator for Garden of Life. Join me in welcoming Amber back onto the podcast today. Hello, Amber. Thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast again. How are you doing today?
I am doing great, Marissa. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much. Before we chat about gut health, can you give our listeners a brief introduction about yourself, also about Garden of Life as a company?
Absolutely. My name is Lynn Vitale. I'm trained as a certified nutritionist in holistic and integrative nutrition, and also as an Ayurvedic clinical consultant. So I bring Ayurvedic medicine to my practice. I joined Garden of Life as a national educator in 2014, and I travel around both virtually and in real life at other times to educate in stores and to the consumer on Garden of Life products, which are almost all of our products are dual certified, organic and non-GMO project verified whenever possible. Besides efficacy being one of our major goals, it's whole food, being derived from food, mimicking food in your body, and real nutrients that come from food. So it's the best of what you would want to be eating.
Absolutely. Garden of Life is definitely one of my top favorite brands because of how amazing the quality of the products are, but also where so many of the ingredients are sourced from and how transparent the company is. So I can't wait to talk more about Garden of Life and in particular their probiotics today. But before we get into that information, I just want to let our listeners know I've asked you to join us today to talk mostly about gut health. You know, gut health has become kind of this trendy topic, but I really personally believe that gut health is the foundation for our overall health. It is in control of so many different things. So from your area of expertise, why do you think taking care of our gut health is so important? What is the purpose of our gut health, and why should people be prioritizing this in their health and wellness journey?
Well, I'm really glad that it's become trendy because that allows people who might not understand the science, the anatomy, the physiology behind it to at least get on board with how important it is. You know, I think that people think about gut health when they feel uncomfortable, when they have gas or bloating or digestive distress. But if that's happening, there are things happening in other parts of your body. The gut is not only making up more than 2/3 of your immune system functioning, it is the gateway to pretty much all activity in your body, and it interacts directly via the vagus nerve with the brain. So we've learned over the last couple decades that even, anxiety and depression, panic attacks, stress, multitasking, these all affect and are affected by your gut health. And so we see how many states of health and disease are related to the health of the gut. Even we now know how you respond to a pathogen, an illness, or even a vaccination is very much dependent upon the health of your gut. How you respond to bioidentical hormone therapy or not bioidentical hormone therapy is dependent upon the health of your gut. So there's so much more to know, but what we do know has brought us, I think, into a state of being in much better control of our health than we once were before we realized how much the gut lining and the microbiome that lives there plays a role in our health optimization.
Absolutely. And as you said, there's so many different areas, our mental health, our physical health, our emotional well-being, so many things that are connected to the gut. But there's also a lot of things that we come in contact with physically, emotionally, mentally, that actually diminish our gut health. So what are those types of things that you think our listeners should be mindful of that have a huge impact on our gut health in a negative way?
Yeah, well, oddly enough, first thing that has a huge impact on our gut health is not coming into contact with things. So when we are born by C-section, as opposed to vaginal birth, when we are kept in a sterile environment, which was sort of the trend when I was a kid, wash, 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 sanitize, 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 wipe down with Clorox wipes. This prevents your immune system from learning how to handle pathogens and distinguish between your own body, which is safe, and things that are not your own body, which are not safe, and also things that are not your body but are safe, like food, or even certain beneficial organisms. So we do have to have this exposure to our environment, so being kept sterile, being born more sterile starts that insult. And having a lack of diversity in the gut due to multiple rounds of antibiotics, people who are on corticosteroids a long time. Like my aunt has been on them for years because of her autoimmune disorders, which actually we know now came from gut issues earlier on in life. So these are things that we know can cause a disruption in the balance of the gut microbiome, which will affect your immune system, which will affect your greater health. And then additionally, of course, high sugar foods, high fructose corn syrup and sodas and other drinks, energy drinks, lots of distilled alcohol will kill off oral microbiome first and then further down the digestive tract. And having foods that are devoid of fiber and devoid of antioxidants, polyphenols specifically, won't feed your gut microbiome, and therefore you will only select for pathogenic organisms. And then additionally, even if you did everything right with your diet and your supplementation, even if you were born naturally, traveled through the birth canal, and you're stressing all the time, you're damaging your gut. So just our mental stress will create immediate damage. That's reparable, but if that goes on day after day after day, you have long-term damage to the gut. And this is where we see people struggling with things like IBS and further issues and insults to the gut lining. It starts in the brain. It starts with us stressing about something.
Yes, and two of those big points that you mentioned of over-sterilization and lack of diversity, I think with where the world has come in the last 2 years, everybody has been in that bubble of, lots of hand sanitizer, lots of wipes, lots of sterile environment, which I understand why it's, part of a regime, but also using that method for long term, I'm sure will have a longer and drastic effect on our gut lining that we may not be aware of more long term. And then stress, that is the number one thing that's driving every single health concern right now. And unfortunately, sometimes with the gut health, we don't necessarily see a symptom right away, other than things like gas and bloating, which are symptoms, but a lot of people can live with those and not really question it. But that stress is just so detrimental to the gut lining over a long period of time. And it's scary to see how many people are suffering with the high levels of stress and then also a compromised gut health, immune system, and all of that will come with that gut lining too.
So true. And then that you said that people let it go is really the crux of the problem. And in Ayurvedic and Chinese medicine, we understand that if you can catch something in the first, second, or third stage of disease, you can really turn it around. But typically in the North American countries, we don't really go for help for these things until they've already reached a fourth or fifth stage of disease and it's something diagnosable. And by then it's harder to turn it around.
Now, you did touch on a few different points of food and diet, lack of fiber, lack of polyphenols, antioxidants. But for our listeners, what would you suggest in terms of foods that they could be consuming on a daily basis that is supportive for the gut health? Either they're rich in probiotics, rich in fiber, or can also help to alleviate some inflammation in the gut lining.
Absolutely. I'm always a food first person. What's interesting is that, we don't have to exclude any person that has a very specific dietary direction. I myself am an omnivore, and I just want to say that. But a plant-based diet is so important for your gut, meaning that you need plants in your diet, on your plate, with the fibers that they bring, especially soluble fibers, and the antioxidants that they bring. And those antioxidants interact as almost messenger molecules with the microbiome. They bring nutrients that enable the microbiome to help you in a beneficial way. We never in human history did we not have access to things growing in the ground, right? And so even if you consume animal products, you need to have plenty of plants and what they bring for you in your diet. And so when we're shopping at the grocery store, what that looks like is making sure that you get things that are rich in prebiotics, like asparagus and jicama if you can get it, and onions are great, garlic is great, leeks are great, and some of this you need raw sometimes. You get benefits from them cooked, but it's also as much as possible good to get some of these raw. You can get a lot of benefit to the microbiome from prebiotics. Actually, I used to hate potatoes, but they actually bring a lot of resistant starch, especially, interestingly, cooked and cooled. So if you made potatoes, then you cooled them and you made it a potato salad, it actually has more of a benefit to your gut than if you ate a hot baked potato loaded up, with chili. So, parboiled rice, and in other countries, or if you have a ethnic cuisine, mung bean starch, plantain flour, cassava flour, these are things that provide those resistant starches that really help grow a microbiome. And then fermented foods, and I know you want to get to that. So your sauerkraut, your kvass, your kefirs, these are a prebiotic, the food, a probiotic, the organisms, and postbiotics, the supernatant, or what those microorganisms created as they ate and digest that food and fermented. And in a fermented food, you get all of it. A probiotic, typically you get the probiotic that grew on the food and it's separated from its supernatant postbiotics. And so that's really good for people with a lot of food sensitivities, and that's why probiotics can be so beneficial. But if you respond well to fermented foods, you're kind of getting the whole package.
Absolutely. So just a recap of those fermented foods would be like kefir, sauerkraut, kimchi, really any type of fermentation of root vegetables as well. Any other suggestions?
That's absolutely true. People think sauerkraut, but you can, because of kraut is cabbage, but you can sour anything, turnips, beets, radishes, all of these things can go into a brine, a fermentation, and be stored and really benefit your gut. We did a lot of that this summer with stuff from our garden, which was awesome. You can have carrots. Kimchi is great because it usually has cabbage in it, but can have so many other things in it. Beet kvass, which comes from Russia and Siberia, is an amazing fermented drink. And then you can even ferment things like your nuts, your seeds, your oats, anything that you leave overnight starts to ferment and break down a little bit. And so these are ways to get some of that live organisms and the postbiotics that they create into your system. And then if you do well with dairy products, cow, goat, sheep, whatever, kefirs, yogurts, it's just that when you buy it in a store, commercially available yogurts and kefirs, even if they're certified organic, probably aren't fermented to the extent that they will turn your health around. They're good maintenance as long as they're not loaded with too much sugar. So typically, if you want to use fermented foods to turn your health in a different direction, you're going to need to do it at home or be sourcing it from someone who has a very raw and perishable item in your grocery store.
That's a good point about the dairy. A lot of people think when they're reading a yogurt and it says added probiotics, sometimes having the conversation with people that it either isn't as strong or it, if it has sugar in there, it's not going to be the same benefit as you would having something raw or another fermented food. So thanks for pointing that out. I would like to talk about some lifestyle factors. So, in terms of lifestyle habits or daily routines, what would you think are some good habits that people should have that will support their gut health?
Right. So, stress management practice is so important. And this is where, I really believe that the three supplement areas that people need, almost everyone needs, is your probiotics and prebiotic fibers, your vitamin D3, and your omega 3s. But beyond that, if you're not sleeping and you're stressing, that is the first area where we need to really help people. And this can be lifestyle practices, and sometimes you need a supplement, like an herbal supplement that can help you adapt to stress. But definitely, whether you take walks, whether you meditate, whether you pray, whether you have a gratitude practice, whether you dance, whatever can help you mitigate stress and enhance your natural endorphins, your endocannabinoid system awakening and enlivening, and your brain-derived neurotrophic factor being produced. All of this creates a happy gut. It creates a healthy gut lining. It actually sends messages to the good microbes in your gut that life is good and we've got a party going on and they can thrive and produce good things for you. There's all this communication in response to your mood and your state of health. And the other thing is you have to sleep, because lack of sleep is a huge stressor on the body. And ideally sleeping naturally, not with pharmaceutical intervention. Some herbal intervention is good because these still have ways to interact with the gut and the endocannabinoid system. Exercise, not excessive, but moving every day and being outside is crucial. Even if all you have access to is a city park, even if you're just walking in the city streets, you are taking in light, taking in air, even if it's not the cleanest air. You're moving, you're challenging your immune system a little bit, and literally taking your gut and your immune system for a walk. If you have a chance to be really out in nature, even better, for mental reasons, for physical reasons, for internal and external reasons. It actually supports gut health. 2 years ago, we moved to Montana from Brooklyn, New York. And now I'm on a 25 acres and I'm out feeding sheep and walking in sheep poop and feeding donkeys and have dogs, and dogs are licking my face all the time. And I never know if my hands are really clean or just look clean. But my health has been amazing as a result of being outside, interacting with the environment, having my hands in the dirt, not over sterilizing. And what you said about these last 2 years, the over sterilization of everything, I am right there with you, Marissa. I'm worried about the effect of that in the future. Every time I rent a car, it smells like bleach. The wiping down of everything, the over sanitization of our kids' hands. I know we need to defend ourselves against these dangerous pathogens, but we have to compensate for that somehow on the other end.
Absolutely. And I love that you reminded us about getting outside, because obviously I'm up in Canada, so we've got a couple feet of snow. It's cold, but the sun is still shining many days. So even if it's a quick walk or not even necessarily a full walk, I try to even just get outside on my back deck when the sun is shining, just for a few minutes of fresh air, and just trying to adapt to the temperature change. Because although we're always wanting to be, at least in Canada, inside beside the fire, it's so good to give your entire nervous system a nice little refreshing wake up by being in that cold weather and trying to adapt to our temperature fluctuations here. So getting outside, so important. And I know for myself, I can't wait till gardening season to kind of just live what you just said, be outside, hands in the dirt. Same thing, wondering, are your hands actually clean, or do you have some good microbiomes growing on there when you're gardening? So those days are coming soon for us Canadians, but I'm happy that your life has really improved and your health has improved by making those adjustments. It really is the success of your health as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Get to a petting zoo. Go pet some animals. Enhance your microbiome. The interesting thing about getting out in the sun, and this is like one of the cornerstones of health, is just getting out in the light, because it affects your endocannabinoid system, the one you already have, the one you're born with, the one that doesn't even need a plant to interact with it, but interacts with the environment and your experiences. And if you have a positive influence on the endocannabinoid system, which we're designed to respond to the light of the sun, we've evolved that way. That creates a signal to the gut that there are good things going on, and the gut then has a positive response, which then affects your overall immune system. So the relationship between being outside, natural light, your endocannabinoid system, your gut response, and your overall immune response is demonstrated, and it's so important to tap into the ride that nature will give you to better health.
Yes, absolutely. So I know you just quickly touched on gut health in terms of a probiotic, but I'd like to dive a little bit farther into probiotics specifically. First, I want to say that, your food, your lifestyle, your stress, your sleep, those are all foundational things that are really, really important to have in play. A lot of people will rely on probiotics to kind of speed the system up, or also if you do have some health concerns like digestive disorders, again, maybe it's mood fluctuations, strengthening your immune system, probiotics can be really beneficial, at least in my experience, to helping the gut lining feel nourished and all those microbiomes feel happy and healthy. So I would love to know what your personal experience is with a probiotic, and do you think that they're essential for gut health?
Absolutely. I mean, I learned about gut health when I was in college, on my own, and eating at the dining hall and able to eat anything I wanted. And I've always been very conscientious about food. I always have heaped my plate with vegetables. I've always eaten the parsley and the kale on the side of the plate, but I have my share of junk food addictions. And in college, that got out of hand, along with antibiotics being prescribed. And I came down with a pretty heavy case of candida, so fungal overgrowth in the gut that affected my overall health. And I had no idea what was going on. Fortunately, I met a naturopathic doctor, and she started to enlighten me to that. She would actually do real stool tests at that time, look at things under her own microscope, and tell you what was going on in your microbiome, and work with diet and supplements to help turn it around. And so from that moment on, I realized that, our health is kind of cruising on in one direction, and it's like being on an aircraft carrier, which is big, and you got this kind of, directive, you're going in a direction, and it's very hard to make a sharp turn. It takes a while to make that turn, and probiotics are like new coordinates for that aircraft carrier that have to get entered in, and then that aircraft carrier has to gradually make a turn to the south or to the east, in a new direction, and it doesn't happen immediately. It's not a right angle turn. It takes a while to make that turn. So probiotics are very strong directives, very strong coordinates. We're able to culture outside the human body only certain strains of the, multitude of possible organisms that you might have in your gut. We know that a healthy, diverse microbiome can easily have thousands of different species and strains of organisms. Those that we can put into a capsule or a powder are just a drop in the bucket, but they tend to be very important ones, and they can lead the charge. They can create signaling and a directive for the gut health. They can produce things like you have lactobacillus species strains that make compounds and signals that affect bifidobacterium species further down in the gut, in the large intestine. And if you don't have those lactobacillus species, this is why fermented foods that are rich in lactobacillus organisms benefit the entire system. They actually make some kind of food that bifidobacteria thrive on, and they create signals that create interaction and communication. So everything is interacting, and a lot of it is happening in the dark of our intestinal tract, and it's still a mystery, but we know what we take in food and in supplements, and we know what the marker that changes is. And this is how we do clinical research on strains. So the probiotics we employ at Garden of Life, there is always clinical research on them that shows statistically significant changes in specific markers of health. And you want things, some of them you want them to colonize, you want them to stay in the gut. Some of them you want to perform a function and pass through. Some of them represent what you should be getting in your food. Some of them represent what you should be getting in your garden, that there are these spore-based organisms, Bacillus thuringiensis, Bacillus subtilis, Clausii. These are things that should be in your soil and on the food, those root vegetables that you take from the soil. And we should always get a little bit of that. And in our scrubbed clean society and scrubbed clean grocery stores, peeled, chlorinated, fluoridated water, we don't get those organisms anymore. And so probiotic supplementation is important for almost everybody.
Okay, so you touched quickly on how Garden of Life does a lot of clinical research, but in terms of Garden of Life's probiotics, what else makes them so unique?
What makes them so unique is the care that is taken in formulation to create a combination that is generally helping the gut lining and the overall immune system. And then in certain formulations, as you would see by the label on the box, you're gearing toward maybe urinary tract support, maybe prostate support, maybe immune support, and that label tells you the clinical research that was done and what exactly it is going to be helping you with. The other thing that is very unique about Garden of Life probiotics, especially, all of our lines, but you don't often see this in a line like the doctor formulated line, is that they're all non-GMO project verified. So probiotics do grow on food, and that food has to provide amino acids, starches, sugars for those probiotics to grow. And in the industry of supplements, most people don't pay attention to where that food that they're growing on came from. It's typically soy, beet, and corn. Soy, beet, and corn are typically genetically modified, and they think, we'll just purify these probiotics off of it and it won't matter. But to us, it matters because it's about better agriculture, and genetically modified agriculture doesn't lead to better soil, better water, and better air. And so we only produce probiotics that are growing on non-genetically modified food, and that supply chain is traceable all the way through.
Amazing. I'm so happy you pointed that out, because a lot of people don't think about how things are created, whether it's your probiotic or it's like the term, like you are what your animal eats, or whatever you're consuming, you are what they eat. So really, really important. And I would love to know your personal opinion. I feel like I know the answer, but there's some controversy around multi-strain probiotics versus single strain probiotic use. What is the difference between these two, other than the fact that one has multi-strain, one has a single strain, in terms of the benefits, or if there is benefits to both?
Well, the idea of a single strain probiotic comes out of two schools of thought. First, it's the Western model of pharmaceutical application, right? A single molecule, a single compound that is being employed in a medical manner. And the second is that this strain would have been researched on its own as a single strain in order to demonstrate clinical benefits. So then when you take that clinically demonstrated strain and you put it in with other clinically demonstrated strains, some people argue that you're just sort of guessing about how they will go together, but it always harkens back to, in a multi-strain probiotic, what strains would coexist together in a fermented food or in your environment or in your gut. And I think people forget with a multi-strain probiotic that they're sleeping in the capsule. They're not awake and arguing and fighting for resources. They're freeze-dried, they're dormant. And when that capsule, or you can open the capsule and put the powder in a smoothie, and when it gets inside of you and it reaches body temperature and the right pH and the right environment and gets moist, they will come alive. They will consume the prebiotic that was given to them as a brown bag lunch, potato starch and acacia fiber, on their way through the gut. They will disperse. Potato starch will help them disperse also and move away from each other and find their own niche in the microbiome in the gut. So they really should never be competing, and they should each be finding their own niche and performing their own function. When I think someone should use a single strain is when they're very sensitive to a lot of new products and they need to test one strain at a time to see how they respond. Fermented food even irritates some people because it has food in it, it has multiple strains, and it has the postbiotics they create. And a person sometimes is so sensitive and can't figure out what in that fermented food is bothering them. And so this is where single strain probiotics can be helpful for people figuring out, hey, what coordinate can edge me in the right direction, right? I just want to turn my aircraft carrier a tiny bit today and see how I do. And so that can be very useful in sort of a clinical setting. But for most of us, we're consuming a probiotic to try to recreate the access to organisms that overall work together to bring our health to a better place.
Now, I know a lot of the Garden of Life products are all multi-strain, and as you mentioned, they have been clinically studied to target specific individuals and what their health concern might be. So I would love to run through a couple scenarios of when a probiotic could be helpful for a specific individual. So first, starting with just the general digestive disturbances such as gas, bloating, constipation, how would somebody pick a probiotic from the Garden of Life line that would support these specific concerns?
Yes, all the symptoms you just described, the person is likely feeling in the lower bowel, so in the large intestine and in the colon. And so the predominant strains that thrive there are the bifidobacterium species strains. And so it helps to have a probiotic that is higher in its ratio of bifidobacterium to lactobacillus species strains, but you don't only need bifidobacteria. We learned this decades ago. You can't just plug and play. You can't just do a stool test and say, oh, your bifidobacteria are low, let's put more in. Because as I said earlier, you have to feed them, and lactobacillus strains play a role in that. So our once daily ultra 90 billion is perfect for lower bowel disruptions, colon, large intestinal stuff like gas and bloating and discomfort, constipation or consturia, going both ways, because it is giving you a higher ratio of bifidobacterium to lactobacillus, but it does give you potent lactobacillus species strains that are known to help turn the tide in the lower bowel.
Okay. Now, what about somebody who suffers with reoccurring UTIs?
Right. And a lot of people say, well, what does my intestinal tract have to do with my urinary tract, right? I've gotten that question a lot. And everything is in close proximity to a microorganism. It's everything that is down there is all connected. And even though your colon is separate from the urogenital tract, separate from the urinary tract, it's separated by membranes, and organisms do travel and share information across those membranes. So anything that affects your colon health will affect your reproductive organs as well as your urinary tract. And so we definitely go straight to the gut. It is the source of all these problems. It's not separate. And this has been the problem with treating urinary tract infections, is you say, oh, it's just an infection in the urinary tract, let's hit it with an antibiotic. And that just isn't the case. It means that something is off in the gut. So our Urinary Tract Plus has a probiotic combination to address the imbalances in the gut, the imbalances in the urogenital system, and it has a cranberry concentrate to help you flush out specifically E. coli, which probably got enhanced in its numbers and created a pathogenic infection, helps you flush that out so that your immune system can overcome it and reestablish balance. So for people who have recurring problems, I don't think of the Urinary Tract Plus as a cure or a treatment. It is a support for normalizing the flora so that you can overcome this recurring problem and create balance. Because obviously people are, if it's recurring, they're kind of on a yo-yo of like treatment, abatement, a return of the problem, getting treatment again. It's just this ongoing merry-go-round, and you need to get off that merry-go-round and support your mucous membranes and your microbiome in managing the problem.
Absolutely. And I see that so often is it's just this cycle when people are suffering with UTIs. And I can personally speak to this. There was a time actually when I was in college, I had a UTI almost every other month and would be on this was before I was in health and wellness, but I would go on an antibiotic, I would come off an antibiotic, go on a probiotic, and it just continued to be a reoccurring cycle. But it wasn't until I actually went to school for nutrition until I realized that what I was eating, what I was doing in my lifestyles. Alcohol was a big impact I felt on recurring UTIs and just getting on the right regime. So it's a little bit more in depth, but as you said, it's a really great way to just flourish the gut lining, and that cranberry can help to kind of flush things out as well. So in terms of anxiety and mood fluctuations, we talked about how, stress, our vagus nerve, our nervous system, everything is still connected to the gut. So for somebody who is suffering, what would be your recommendation of a Garden of Life product from the probiotic line that would suit this individual?
Yeah, any probiotic can ultimately help with that gut-brain axis, which is great to know. I think people have to realize that as you take in a probiotic and anything pathogenic in your body gets pushed out and you have die-off, it can take a while before, your brain sort of catches up and says, ooh, I feel much better about my communication here. But there are certain strains that very specifically have been clinically demonstrated to change the way we handle anxiety, stress, depression, our responses to stress. And it's fascinating that single strains, like the two that are in our mood probiotic, Lactobacillus helveticus and Bifidobacterium longum, these single strains alone with no other changes, no meditation, no walking, no medical intervention, pharmaceutical intervention, just these two strains alone produced statistically significant changes in depression and anxiety as a response to stress, and even physical symptoms like gas, bloating, nausea, acid stomach, reflux, this kind of things that come with that anxiety and stress. So I was blown away when this research was coming out, and then further blown away that we were one of the first companies to come out with a probiotic to address that, really right at the time when this information was blowing up and people were becoming aware that you could actually change the way your brain functions by changing the health of your gut. So the mood probiotic has those strains in a blend of our 14 generally supportive strains with ashwagandha, which is an awesome herb. There's actually 300 milligrams of ashwagandha in 2 capsules. It's an amazing, it's really a food, ashwagandha, a root that is very supportive of your ability to handle stress. I think of ashwagandha as pacifying your adrenals and saying, yeah, you're not at risk of dying. You're not running from a lion. It's really just your taxes. It's really just a deadline. Calm down, and helps you manage the cortisol output, your adrenaline output, and therefore also how your gut responds. So it's a kind of a triple whammy in that product for supporting stress management and changing your mood and the way your brain responds.
Yes, that's my favorite probiotic. That one I find just really takes the edge off if you are somebody who runs naturally at a higher level of stress.
I'd love to say one more thing about the mood probiotic, because, the first question was about gas and bloating, and then the last question was about, mood. And the mood probiotic I have found is very helpful for younger people, like in their 20s and 30s, women especially, but also men who do run at high speed. They're working full time. They're very interactive socially on social media and socially in person. They feel gas, bloating. They feel, like they're getting sick around the middle. So they start going to CrossFit and over exercising, and all of this just ramps up cortisol output, stress hormone, and it just makes the problem worse. So if you are feeling a lot of digestive distress and you can assess yourself that you are just living life a little too fast, the mood probiotic is really an ideal one for that person.
Yes, I think you summed up that exactly how I feel of just like running, go, 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 using exercise as a way to cope and manage stress, but also there's that fine line. So I love that this probiotic has the added ashwagandha in it to support our stress levels. So that's fantastic. Okay, how about children? Because I don't know what it's like down in Montana right now, but in Canada, our schools have opened up and we have a lot of parents that are coming in looking for ways to boost their children's immune system so that they're not sent home from school for, the common cold or just a little sniffle. So probiotics are usually my number one go-to for children to get their immune system up. But can you talk a little bit more about the Garden of Life children's probiotic and why that might be a great option?
Yes, Marissa, and let me use this opportunity to say that, we run to the store, the health food store, to a practitioner looking for immune support, and we think about vitamin C and D and zinc and elderberry and echinacea and all of these things. These are Band-Aids that are acute care when, we haven't really been paying attention all along. The first thing that a parent needs for their child's immune health is that probiotic and those healthy foods to support a healthy microbiome. So if you have limited finances, spend it on a probiotic. And what's great is like our children's chewable probiotic has the 14 strains in it, focusing on immune health and mucosal membrane health in the child. And there's vitamin C and vitamin D and cranberries. So you're getting a lot of the things that you would be looking for in that chewable probiotic in one go. And it's protecting children where they're vulnerable, which is the mouth and the sinus passages. Young kids, they put everything in their mouth, right? And they don't think to wash their hands. Did you wash your hands? Yes, mommy, I did. You can't believe them. They're not, their whole time reference is different than ours. They need that support in the mouth and in their sinus passages. So a chewable lozenge is perfect for kids. And we want them taking that probiotic every single day. What I love is no sugar in it. So literally it can go in their mouth as they go out the door and get on the bus, or as they go out the door and into the car for you to drive them to school, or you can pop it in their mouth when they get home, pop it in their mouth before bed. They don't have to brush their teeth after chewing on this delicious lozenge just because it isn't sweetened with sugars that cause tooth decay. It's sweetened with prebiotic fibers. So it's a fabulous solution for kids. My kids are teenagers now, but I still make them take this stuff because it's just easy for them, better than a capsule.
Yes, flavor and good quality sugars in that is also so superior in that product. So that's fantastic. Okay, I have one more question in terms of targeting a probiotic for a specific individual. So for those that are listening and thinking, I don't suffer with any of those symptoms. My digestion's really well. I don't have recurring UTIs or vaginal infections. I've got great health, great mood. Do you still think that a probiotic would be an important thing for them to add into their supplement regime?
Well, what we have to ask that person is we have to inquire about their diet. And everybody, has a different idea of what a good diet is. And I'm going to out some people right here, but as a nutritionist, I've heard so many times, oh, I eat really healthy. I have yogurt and granola for breakfast. And, then they go on, I have a nice sandwich for lunch with, some lettuce and tomato on it. And so I listen and I'm like, this is what we've been taught is healthy and balanced, but these things are full. Yogurt and granola is a parfait. That's dessert. And as tasty as it is, and as much as I might do it, it's typically a store-bought commercial yogurt and a granola that's full of sugar and a yogurt that's full of sugar. So these are not things that are giving you a strong fermentation and a diverse dose of probiotics, and they're giving you a lot of sugar, which will feed all your microorganisms, including your bad ones. So we have to assess a person's diet. Do they have real fermented foods in their diet? Do they have real food coming out of the dirt, like a garden? Do they have a diversity of plants in their diet, giving them naturally occurring fibers and antioxidants. If not, then they probably need probiotic support, the degree of which, depending upon, which of those they do and do not have. If they don't have any of those, if they shop out of a commercial market, if they don't eat or access fermented food that's fully fermented, alive, bubbling, you can't seal the jar and you have to bring it home and put it in the fridge. And if they don't tend to consume the prebiotic-rich plants and brightly colored fruits and vegetables, that their plate is made up mostly of those things, then they probably need a probiotic as ongoing support. Most of us have this idea, well, nothing's wrong yet. If we inquire a little bit more deeply, it'd be like, oh, well, there's certain things I eat that bother me and I get a little gas and bloating, but I take a digestive enzyme every day and I'm fine. That doesn't necessarily mean you're okay. It means that your body's telling you, hey, this isn't ideal and we can manage this for a while, but eventually this is going to squeeze out somewhere else. And they might wind up with joint problems and think it's completely unrelated, but that is always related back to digestive health. So if you don't grow your own vegetables on your own soil, if you don't, or get it from a farmer's market where you have to wash it off, if you don't ferment or eat fully fermented foods, and if you don't have a diet really rich in fiber-rich and antioxidant-rich plants, then you probably need a probiotic supplement.
Also, if you're not stressed, then maybe you don't. But as I said, I think everybody is dealing with some level of stress, whether it is, work-life balance or financial relationship, whatever it might be. I think everybody has a state of stress. And as we said at the beginning, that is something that impacts our gut health. And although we need to try to manage that level of stress externally, a probiotic can definitely support our gut lining during that time. So with the recap of those products you talked about to our listeners, I will put the probiotics that Amber recommended on our website for this blog post. So if you want to refer back to that blog post to see the names of them, you can do so on our Joanne's Place website. But Amber, I want to thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today again and sharing your wealth of knowledge. And to our listeners, thank you for checking out today's episode. And I invite you to come into our Joanne's Place locations to learn more about which of these probiotics from Garden of Life is best suited for you. Thanks again, Amber, and I'll see you hopefully soon.
Thank you so much, Marissa. You take care.
If you guys are still here, thank you so much for checking out today's episode. You know what to do now. Be sure to subscribe to our channels so you're notified as soon as a new episode is released. And also find us on social media and share that you are listening to the Wellness on Purpose podcast.